Hey, welcome back to CLO. In this part, we're going to look at creating some pattern bases and working with avatars. So let's get started with the avatars. So on the right side of the screen, on the left side of the screen here, you have avatar as an option. Double click this and you will see these folders that appear with the different avatar options. I'm going to go with male version 1 and I'm going to just choose the guy on the left. Doesn't really matter for the sake of this, but this is now my avatar that I can work with. Quick note on sizing, if you go to avatar in the top menu here, go to avatar editor, you can input in this space your specific measurements, your height, your width, everything you need to kind of create a custom shaped and sized avatar here. So that's how you would do that. I'm going to close out the avatar editor and just look at this in 2D and 3D space for a minute. So you'll see even in the 2D window, we have a representation of this avatar now. So this would mean if I long click on this polygon icon here, I choose rectangle and I draw just a thin little pattern piece. This will appear in front of my avatar, and if I press Shift and Z, I will see that this pattern piece is 192 centimeters tall. So this guy with his hair is 192 tall. If I click the hair, right click and click delete accessory, his hair is gone. You can do the same for the shoes to delete them if you want. I'm going to delete this pattern piece, but this now shows you that we have a real world size representation of our avatar in the 2D space. So if we need to draw around this, we will get something quite accurate to the size of the avatar. The first thing I want to show you is the modular configurator on the left side. So choose modular configurator, and this new menu will appear in your workspace. Go to man. Go to, let's start with jackets, and I'll do a single breasted jacket. So this is going to allow us now to configure a tailored jacket pattern based on what kind of designs we want to input into this. So if you look at this space, let's make this a bit bigger. We have like a tuxedo lapel, a peak lapel, and a notch lapel. We have a no vents, 2 side vents, and a center back vent, and then we have these 3 sleeve options for the buttons. Okay, so let's choose 1 front, 1 back, and then 1 set of sleeves. When you choose these are automatically kind of being arranged around the avatar, but you see that it's just a little bit off in terms of position, like our avatar is stood a bit further back, but that's quickly generated a pattern that should be pretty much the right size for this avatar. So if I go back to the modular configurator and I press this close, this left arrow here, this will close the menu back into where it came from. And we can look now at how to simulate this around our avatar, okay? I'm going to press Shift and Z to turn off this view of the measurements, and I'm going to press Control and A to select all of these pattern pieces. And I'm just going to use this blue arrow to bring this back to kind of sit right on top of our avatar. So if I look, before we simulate, if I choose a piece, for example, and I move this, you'll see all the sewing is already automatically done for us. So if I click the sewing machine, I look here, everything is stitched together. It's all pre-constructed, it's all folded, it's all ready to go. This is a nice way to just produce a base for something to work with. So if I simulate now, this jacket is simulating, it's working well. This is a nice pattern. Okay, this is one way to start from a base pattern inside CLO. This isn't what we're going to do for the project that I'm working on today, but this is just what I wanted to introduce you to. If you want to change the pose of your avatar, you can choose your avatar. Inside the folder you were selected, you will have pose, and then you have T pose, A pose, and then standing pose. So if you want to take him now to look kind of standing like this, I'm just going to double click this pose and click pose only, maintain avatar size. So if you added your own sizing measurements to this avatar, you can maintain those measurements by keeping this checked. Full body pose, align, leave everything as it is and just click OK. And now your avatar will move his arms down and it will be more in a standing pose with his jacket on. Okay. This modular configuration will automatically add all your fabrics into the side of the screen here. They might have presets, they might not, depending on what they are. But this is done in a way where it's all automated for you. If I go into this now, you can end up breaking the modularity. You know this is modular because of these gray windows around everything, okay? This means it's being controlled by the modular configurator. If I went back into this now and I changed the back, for example, it would delete the old back pieces, bring the new back pieces in, automatically stitch them, and then I would just have to position them a bit more correctly in the 3D space. And then I simulate again, and now I have the new back to this jacket is attached. So you can keep using this modularity as you go through working with these patterns, but that's one way of working. For now, I'm going to delete these patterns, and I'm just going to quickly explain what we're going to create today in terms of this bomber jacket, okay? So this is the reference that I'm kind of want to work with. This shape of a jacket, this was a quick sketch I did to just put some pockets and details on this. I quite liked this cut shape here from this bomber jacket that I found, and I liked these wrinkles in the sleeves, so I wanted to have some wrinkles and some of these cuts. I liked the pockets of this jacket, this kind of shape and angle, and I liked the sleeve pocket here, so I wanted to put a little sleeve pocket as well. This is the fit that I want to look at, this kind of shape, and this is the pattern that I'm going to use as a base, as an input, okay? This program that I'm using here to look at this mood board is called PureRef, so I'll put a link to that in the description, but it's a nice way to kind of arrange images and, you know, resize things and make mood boards that kind of sit together, so good thing to use for references, okay? So like I said, this will be the pattern that we work from. This is what we want to achieve in the end, and this is kind of a look for the overall fit as we want it on the avatar. I'm going to explain now how to work with your own avatars. So as much as CLO has its own inbuilt system for avatars, I'm going to delete this one. So I click on it, press delete. I'm going to delete the fabrics by just pressing this last, I think it's like a paintbrush or something, like a sweeping brush that clears them away. So if you want to delete a fabric, just press that like little icon on the side and it will delete the fabric. And now I'm going to look at importing my own avatars. So in my project folder, I have an avatars folder, an obj avatar. These are avatars that I made in DAZ and that I've exported from DAZ. So I'm going to take the T-pose first, just literally drag that into the scene. I don't want to save anything, there's nothing there, and I just want to change this from open to add avatar, leave everything else as it is and click OK. And my custom avatar should now be in the scene that I've worked with, that I produced in my other program. I know the scaling is correct because when I look here, the grid, his position inside this grid is correct. If he was a lot smaller, I would notice he would be very tiny here, or a lot bigger, he would be on the size of the grid. So I know he's right, and if I make a pattern piece in this space and I press Shift and Z, I know that he's 180 centimeters tall. Okay, so that's fine for what we want to work with now. That's how you import your own avatar. If you want to change poses, I will get to that as we go through this process. But for now, we want to set up our base pattern, and I'm going to do that by tracing it off from our reference image. So first, let's add a rectangle. Choose the rectangle tool, and we have one fabric preset here, and I'm just going to click and drag over my avatar to make a big rectangle. I'm then going to go to my references folder where I have this pattern saved. So the first pattern I want is the body of the jacket. So I'm going to take this and just drag and drop it into my fabric. And when I do that, I want to make sure that my texture map type is set to texture. If this comes in as a graphic, you'll know because it'll look different and it won't come in as a grid. If it comes in as a t-shirt graphic, the way that you can add this to the fabric is to click the fabric, choose the fabric here, and then under texture, press these 4 little squares and it will bring up a folder, and you can select here your texture, your image that you want to use as a texture. So I'll choose this image, press open. You know, you can drag or drop or click this icon here. Now I want to go to this option that looks like a checkered piece of fabric with an arrow. And this allows me to move around my, basically the print inside the fabric, okay? I'm going to zoom in on this. And to do that, you have this diagonal arrow here. If I just click and drag, this will zoom this in and out in this little gizmo in the top corner here. And I want to be able to see through this in order to look at my avatar. So if I go to Fabric 1, on the side I click here, I scroll down to opacity in the property editor, and I just reduce this down somewhat. I should be able to see through this a little bit more and see my avatar through the other side. Okay. What I want to do, I can just see the shoulder line here, which is enough for what I need right now. But I want to position basically this shoulder line on my avatar's shoulder. So I'll put this opacity just back up a little bit. Like that. So now I have this from the neck to the end of the shoulder is kind of the right dimension. So that means this pattern base is going to be in a good proportion to work with around this avatar. If I was too big, it would be quite oversized, and if I was too small, it'd fit too closely, but this can be a good way to check how good the proportion of your pattern is. So I know I want this to sit from the neck here just to the top of the shoulder here, so I think this is a good proportion. And now I have a pattern that I can start to work with to trace off. So I'm going to set the opacity of this all the way back to full, so it's completely white and visible. And I'm going to make a new fabric. So click add, rename this fabric by double clicking and call it trace. In the opacity, bring this down about halfway, and you could even add a little bit of a color if you wanted to. And then we're going to choose the rectangle here, long click the rectangle and go to polygon, or press H as the hotkey on the keyboard. Zoom in with your mouse, scroll, and we're just going to trace around this pattern piece to create our own pattern at this point. I found this pattern online. It's an image I saved off the internet. It looks quite accurate. It's written in German. I trust that it's going to work well. Don't use hand-drawn ones. Don't use anything that looks illustrative. Use something that looks like a scale, an accurate version. I think this should be fine for what we want today. But this is just found on, an image search online. With our trace fabric as our primary fabric, choose the polygon tool and then click from one point in the shoulder to the other to draw a line. Click to create the neckline, and then click and drag to make that line curved. And that's about the right curve there. Then if you click inside this, it will take the curve off the edge and it will give me a straight line again. Now, if you click into the vector point that we've created, come down to the bottom and choose the bottom corner, choose the other corner, choose the side seam, and then connect back to the first point that we started with and click to close the shape. If we want to add curvature to this edge now to create the armhole, press C on the keyboard, or long click this edit pattern tool and choose edit curve. So C or long click here, and you can now drag this line and make it a smooth curve into where the armhole is. We're going to do this for all the pattern pieces so that we can then start to simulate these around the body. And it's easiest, I think, to use the curve tool. So press Z on the keyboard to go back into the edit pattern view. I'm just going to straighten this front up because you see this is at a bit of an angle. So I'm just going to open this out a little bit to straighten the front up. This looks vertical now. Press H or go back to the polygon select tool on the side of the screen, the polygon draw. And I'm just going to click basically on the points and not deal with the curves just yet. Just click on each corner of the pattern pieces. And zoom in if you need to be a bit more accurate. Click all those points and then press C and then just go around and curve the ones that need to be curved. Okay. I'm going to press Z to just select this corner and just put it right where it needs to be. And then I can use this tool to kind of toggle those curve points here and get this quite nice and correct. Same here, I can correct this a little bit. So now we have the two body pieces of the pattern. So I'm going to go back to the fabric here with our pattern piece in it, and I'm going to change this to the sleeve and select the sleeve piece. And for this, I'm just going to zoom in I'm going to choose this tool on the side again, the edit texture tool. So again, that would be T as the shortcut, so press T. And use this diagonal line to click and drag to get the size of this sleeve. Again, I would say drop the opacity of this down and just look roughly at the size of, go right down with this opacity, the size of our avatar that we can see underneath. So if I go back to the edit texture and I look at kind of the length of the arm of the avatar from here to here, if I use this, I can rotate the pieces, okay? I'll rotate and I'll just line up this point with the shoulder, and I know that this is way too short. So if I continue to zoom in with this a little bigger using this diagonal line again, I should be able to, maybe I'll go the other way to this arm, rotate this like this. And I'll see that this connects to the top of the sleeve here, but it goes right into his hand now. Like if I zoom in here, this is the middle of his hand. So I know I need to be a little bit shorter. And I think that should about do it from the top there. Maybe a little tiny bit big. Just spend some time trying to get this proportion right, but if I go from the shoulder here all the way down, I'm going to move this back piece out of the way. You'll see now that from here to the wrist is kind of a good proportion measurement. So if I go back to the, press T to go back to the texture edit tool, or click the edit texture tool on the side, you can scroll down in the right side and look at grain direction of this piece here. Oh, it's set to 0. I want to set this back. Just re-rotate this back to like vertical. You can use shift and hold shift and it should lock this back into the vertical direction. And we're just going to do the same as we did before. I'm going to go back to pattern select mode, move these front and back out the way, and then just zoom in on the sleeve and create now a trace from this sleeve. So choose the trace fabric again, go back to polygon, choose the polygon tool, and then go to kind of the key points. So choose this corner, this notch, this front point, the elbow, the wrist. Zoom in again if you need to be a bit more accurate. And just select the main points of this pattern. I'll do it for both right now. Maybe here. And then we can add the curvature after with the curve tool. So I'm going to press C on the keyboard to curve, so I'll click and drag this one up. Same here, click and drag this one in. Click and drag. Just to get some nice smooth curves going around all the edges of these pieces. So we can have a nice shaped sleeve pattern. This can curve in a little, so can this one. Push this in a bit too. And bring this one out a little bit. So now we've traced off the sleeve. One thing I want to do is just add a notch as the very top sleeve point here. So the notch tool is here on the right side. It says notch. It's a little line within the seam line here. So if I go to that and click notch, I'll get this little yellow notch appeared. It turns red when we're not selecting it. And that just lets me know where the shoulder point is of this sleeve. So I know now that this shoulder seam will connect to this point here. And now we've traced off all of our pieces, okay? So if I click the pattern layer that we've had and I just click delete, and I can even delete on the right side here, the fabric piece, I now have my basic jacket pieces to start to work with. So I'm going to press Shift and Z on the keyboard to turn off the measurements for a second while we just lay this out. So this is the back piece, this is the front piece, and this is the sleeve. We're going to go ahead now and get this ready to stitch together. So the first thing we want to check, I'm just going to click and drag to give myself more 2D space to work with, because we're doing a lot of 2D work at this point. I could even go in the library here and click this in facing arrow to close out this library section if I don't need it at the moment to give myself more screen space, so I'll do that. And now I'll press Shift and Z to turn on the measurements again, and we can have a look at this in terms of accuracy. So if I put this in the shoulder, the shape looks quite good and there's a bit of pitch in the side seam here. I'm going to move the sleeve out the way and I'm going to put the back panel next to it. The first thing I'm going to do is just press Z to choose the corner point here, and now I'm in pattern edit mode, so that's Z. Choose it, and if I press shift, this will lock this to one direction, so it'll either lock it across, it'll lock it diagonal, or it'll lock it vertical, but it'll lock it to one of these arrows when I press shift. So I'm going to press shift and drag this straight across just to make these two seams really parallel, and we see that they're almost exactly the same length, 31.94 centimeters and 31.96, so that's fine for me right now. We can see here that this needs just a little bit to be straightened up in the front. I'm just looking at the square grid next to this, and I can see that it lines up. I don't know if it comes through in the screen recording, but I'm looking basically at one of these lines and just lining up the front edge of this jacket to be very straight across one of these grid lines. This drop is fine for now. We can keep that there. We'll change it if we need to. The next thing we see is the shoulder seam is a bit narrow on the front and wider on the back. So I'm just going to bring the neck point here. I'm just going to click and drag this in a little bit. Maybe 2 more millimeters. You can see in purple, what's written in purple is the adjustment that I'm making to this measurement. So now I've made a 0.19 centimeter adjustment, and these are about 14.3 millimeters each, okay? So that's the side and the front and the back. I'll quickly arrange this sleeve construction. So this is the top sleeve and this is the undersleeve. We'll display this in a second. But this side needs to connect to this side and this side needs to connect to this side, okay? So this is the back of the sleeve that I'm going to stitch together here. And if I look at the number that's coming from these sewing lines, this is here, 49.83 and 49.38, which means I've got 0.45 centimeters difference in these two sewing lines. So I want to fix that to make sure that everything is kind of quite accurately done. And I know that this side is the short side. So if I press C on the keyboard, I could just curve this line out to make it a bit longer. Go back to the sewing machine tool and choose this. And we're nearly there. I'm just going to drop this point down, I think. So I'll press the Z on the keyboard and drop this a couple millimeters down. 2 millimeters. I'll go back to the sewing machine, choose this line, and we're nearly at the same measurement now, okay? A few millimeters is okay, but you don't want to have any more than that, as it can really affect the look of this. So again, I'm going to use the free sewing machine again, which is the third icon here. The third sewing machine down, and just click from this point down to the cuff of the sleeve and this point down to the other side of the sleeve, and that will kind of stitch them together. So if you look in 3D space now, that's showing us how these are being stitched. We're going to arrange this 3D space before we simulate anything, but we've started to look at how this sleeve's going to work. This point here is this point here. So this is my shoulder seam and this is my high shoulder point, this notch here. So I'm going to go click from here and go left down to the front. Click here and go left all the way down to the bottom, and then it will stop, okay? Where this stops, I'm going to go to the side, I'm going to choose notch, and I'm going to add a notch at this point. So I visually know now that this bit of my sleeve stitches into this bit of my pattern, okay? I'm going to go and now fix the back side. So if I go back to the sewing machine, the third icon down, the free sewing, I go from the back of the notch to around the back of the sleeve. Again here around the back, from the back down. And again, when I finish stitching, put a notch so I know that this here fits from here to here. And then I'm going to finish off this sewing here and this sewing here with this piece of pattern piece here, which already looks too short for what we've got. So we're going to need to spend a minute to fix this. I'm going to click from here and go all the way to the bottom, and click from here and go all the way down. So we're missing this much of our sleeve. That's fine, we can add that in. We're going to need to add that in, but we're not going to do that right now. We're going to simulate this up, we're going to deactivate the sleeve, and we're just going to look at the body for a second, okay? So go back to the triangle tool here, I'm going to, the triangle being the transform pattern tool, so I can just select my pattern pieces. I'm going to drag this center division again to have more 2D and 3D space, and I'm going to press Control and A in the 3D space, right click and click Reset 2D Arrangement, and that will reset my pieces kind of as they are in the 2D space right now, okay? Choose the two sleeve patterns, so click to deselect everything, choose the two sleeves, right click and click Deactivate Pattern and Sewing, and these guys are deactivated now. They've gotten grayed out and their stitch lines have turned white, they're blue here. They're not going to work anymore in the simulation. The only thing that will work now is the front and the back, okay? So in order to stitch this all together, we need a left and a right side. So select these two pattern pieces, right click and click Clone Pattern with Linked, Symmetric Pattern with Sewing. So it's in the top section and here, Symmetric Pattern with Sewing. And then just place them like symmetrically next to them as they are on the screen, and they will appear here in the 3D space as well. So now we have two fronts and two backs that are linked. So if I go now, I'll just give some space between the side seams here. If you go now to the second option here, which is the segment sewing tool, or N on the keyboard, we can sew segments directly. So if I zoom in on my shoulder, I select my shoulder segment, and as I move from left to right, this notch kind of moves from side to side with me. So I'll put the notch near the armhole. And here I'll do the same. The notch goes near the armhole so that I know that this sewing is going in the right direction. The same for the body. If I were to do this the opposite way, like these travel across from each other now. If I undo this with Control Z, I click here, but then this side, I flip it. You see all my stitches flip and this would twist around. This would pull and twist in the other direction, so that's not correct. To fix that, you can right click and click with the sewing machine selected, right click and click reverse sewing, and that will fix the sewing, but we still want to use the segment sew tool. But the nice thing about this clone option is that when I stitch these seams are stitched as well. So everything gets stitched on the linked piece that we've worked with, so we're going to have to stitch the left side once, and it should update on the right side as well. Okay. I'm going to click the front edges and stitch those together as well. And I'm going to click the center back pieces and stitch those together as well, okay? Select the pieces in the 3D workspace and just drag them close to the avatar and kind of a bit higher up than his shoulders. For the back pieces, I'm just going to place them next to each other. I'm going to select them both. I'm going to spin them around this way. And then I'm just going to drag them to the back of my avatar like this. And you see now all the stitching is kind of moving around the sides of this avatar's body, and this is where our seams are going to become connected now. So even the two fronts is all stitched, all the stitching is connecting, it's going in the right way, this looks good. Hit the spacebar on the keyboard and this will simulate to create the base of the jacket, which is looking fine already. It looks to be going straight down in the back, the balance is okay. In trace, I'm going to turn this opacity back up to the top because I don't need it to be see-through anymore, and I'm going to turn it from pink to like a bluish color. Let's like this. Turn off the simulation, and then we can start to look at how to line up these sleeves ready for simulation as well. So the top sleeve I'm going to select, I'm going to twist it round, I'm going to roll this kind of axis this way and just place it directly above the avatar's arm like this. And I'm going to do the same with the bottom piece. So twist this one round. Put this long side should go towards the back and this short side should go towards the front. Roll it again to be at the same kind of angle as the avatar, and then just place this under the arm and drag this back. Again, I'm just using the right click to rotate this, clicking the pattern pieces, using this gizmo to arrange things, and just arrange this under the arm here. So this should now be ready for us to fix. If I get this in a good position here, it should be ready for us to fix the issue with the measurement. So I'm going to bring this space back into 2D, so just use this divider and push it back again. Let's look at our sleeve now, okay? So we need approximately, there's 6 centimeters here and I guess about 2 here, so we need another 7 centimeters in our sleeve. which is fine. It's going to give us a really nice sportswear feel to the top of the sleeve. And we're going to do this by increasing the width from here to here. So right now, this is the total length of the top of our sleeve, and we want to increase this. So we're going to push this point out and push this point out and bring these points closer together to add some more dimension into the top of this sleeve. So to make this adjustment, we'll add the width, and we're also going to increase the length of this seam here that goes underneath the arm. So this seam here is the one that sits under the front of the arm, and this one sits under the back of the arm, okay? So we need to increase this length and increase this width here. So in order to do that, I'm going to press the C button on the keyboard to go to edit pattern. I'll just quickly save this. I'm going to save it as pattern base, and then we're going to keep saving versions on top of this as we go through, because we can then always come back to later versions. So this is our base pattern right now. So looking at this sleeve piece, go to the edit pattern tool, press Z on the keyboard to get back to it. Choose this line and press using the direction keys on your keyboard, press the left key once, and this will now move 1 centimeter left. So you can use this tool to just quickly add into the patterns by 1 centimeter exactly. So again, if I go to this side and I press again 1 centimeter, I've now added 1 centimeter on this side of the sleeve as well. I'm going to choose both of these at the same time and press up on the keyboard to add 1 centimeter in length of this pattern piece, and I think one more. That means that when these two pieces are right next to each other now, okay, and I go from here across to here, this should remain in a vertical line. I'll draw that line in, and then what we're going to have is a line coming down from the shoulder all the way to the cuff, like vertically down. I'm pressing shift and dragging that down using the internal line tool, which is with G on the keyboard. I'm going back to edit pattern with Z to finish this off, but when you're editing a pattern, a sleeve pattern, make sure that these 2 points are always parallel to each other. They're always having the same distance, same from here to here, and that this is at a right angle from this line coming down the top of the sleeve. So you see this line here comes straight down the top of the pattern, straight down the arm, and this one across here is our dimension horizontally. So I'm just going to click here and come across one more. They're still on the same plane, but they're still on the same length as well. So now this is looking a bit better. I'm going to drag this curve here to just curve the underside of this sleeve a little more. And I'm going to zoom in here and just curve this down a bit as well. Okay. Might bring this in a little bit here. And then if I grab the top point here, I can bring this down a little bit with the idea that we're now flattening off this measurement here, the top of the sleeve, so that we get a much closer fit. And we can look now at reapplying the stitching to this to see if we need to make many more adjustments. I'm going to go back to the 3D space, press Ctrl and A, right click on the unactivated pieces and click activate, and now everything is activated. The stitching is working, it's placed nicely around our arm. It should stitch quite well when we correct this, okay? So first things first, go back to the the sewing machine tool here, which is the top one. So B on the keyboard or click the tool. And we can see now, I'm going to press Shift and Z to turn off the measurements so I can just look at the measurements of the sewing. So this is 17 and this is 16, so that means I've added a lot in here. So I'm just going to bring this back and probably close this all the way down. So with this sewing here, I'm going to finish this on the side seam. And with this one here, I'm going to keep going, because you see, if I choose this sewing line, it says 4.45 in red, which means that there's 4.5 centimeters more in this piece here than in this piece here. It's 18.9 versus 14.53, so we need to correct this. So I'm going to drag this stitch, like the sewing line here, and I'm just going to drag it all the way to the end. And it's still not 1-to-1. So here I can just drag this back a little bit, and I know now that this piece of sewing here finishes here. Okay, we're going to do the same for the front. So the front is 20 and this is 19. So we still need to add more into this sleeve head right now. The best way to do this is going to be, again, to just add across the width of this pattern piece here. So I'm going to press Z to go back to edit pattern mode, choose this point here, keep dragging this out, lift this point up, and just start to flatten this off a bit. I'm going to bring this point back and then use C to straighten this up here, and press Z, and I'm going to bring this point back and use this to straighten things up a little bit here. Use C to curve this point out. So now we should have, if I go back to my sewing machine, so choose the first sewing machine icon, the edit one, and I look here now, I have 21.8 here and 20 here, so I can bring this all down. And the point is to keep making the same adjustment as we go through, but I think I could also take a little bit out of this side seam, because this width here is quite big. So I'm just going to press Z, go back to edit pattern, choose the back piece, and press right to come in 1 centimeter. So I take out 1 centimeter on each side, and then we go back to correcting the top of the sleeve. Okay, so I'm going to go through the same process, adding length into these pieces, into this total width across here, and then seeing how much we can straighten off the top of the sleeve head here. Let's see if we just add a little, if I press Z and add a little bit more into this width, bring this back, adding as much length as we can into the top of the sleeve. Keeping a nice smooth curve where we can. Yeah, making this roll quite flat on the top. Choose the sewing machine again, and let's see how far we've got this time. So we've got another 2 centimeters we can add here. And I'm also gonna check the back one, bring this down. Okay, so let's work from top to bottom. So the purple line is here to here. This is now moved down to here. So I'm going to drag this down. Where this blue point is, this little tiny blue point is where it's finished. So drag this down to where it's finished. Go back to your notch, click and drag this notch down and put that at the end of the finished purple stitching line. Back to the sewing machine, choose the blue stitching line. Drag the blue stitching line down to this notch here. And we know that we've still got 1.5 centimeters addition, okay? I'm going to come here and bring this back again till the blue line stops, and the blue line stops there, to the blue point stops there. Back to the sewing machine, take this little piece here, this 1.54 centimeters, and go from the inside seam back out to the top there, okay? So that means we've stitched now this and this all into this piece of armhole. And at this point is where I'm going to take the notch. So I'm going to click this notch here and drag this down to this point here. And just add in another 1.5 centimeters into this back, the undersleeve, okay? So I'll take this point, drag it out, and I'll take this point and I'm going to drag it back. And I'm just going to correct this sewing very quickly now. So back to the sewing machine, choose this point. This one's fine. This one we can add more into. So I've corrected now this sleeve. So this front measurement is pretty much the exact same. This small undersleeve piece here is 2.7 and 2.7 centimeters in the front. The back part of the sleeve is 17 centimeters in the back, and the top part is 10 in the top. Your measurements are going to be different, but the point is to get all the way around this armhole, we needed a shorter sleeve head compared to our reference image. So if I look at the reference of the sleeve, this is what we had as the reference. And as you see, this is quite long and shaped in the top, and we've created something now quite more of a sporty construction of a jacket with a longer sleeve head on the top, but still to be fitted as we come down the arm. So the last thing we're going to check is this inside length here. So if I choose the green line, this one is about 1.7 centimeters, 1.8 bigger than the front. So I'm just going to press Z on the keyboard to choose this point here, bring it forward a little bit, and just smooth out some of this curvature to reduce the total length in the inside. And we're still about 1.5 centimeters off, but that's not to worry because we're going to add some gathering into this, okay? So the top sleeve is now placed. I'm going to press the spacebar to simulate this, and this is now simulated around our avatar. Spacebar to turn off. I'm going to select these two pattern pieces again, right click, symmetric pattern with sewing, and then drag this to the side. And then this should appear directly over the other arm of the avatar, and then press spacebar again. And now our two sleeves are stitched into our avatar. They look a little bit short, but we're going to have some cuffs attached to this as well. But I'm just going to click these and drag them very slightly longer. Simulate this one more time, and now we've got our sleeves attached to our body, and we can start to use this to generate the rest of our pattern width. So in part 2, I will explain the next steps for the construction of the collar, the pockets, and the waistband and the sleeves. So see you guys in part 2.